This is Dr. Kim, licensed clinical psychologist and host of Love to Heal. Today we have a very special guest. She is Lebanese, Canadian, activist, author, speaker, and educator. Thank you so much for being here today, Najwa.
Thank you for having me. I'm really
And
excited. I've been excited about this for a while. So,
you're incredible. And so I have seen you on TikTok, and I know you influence millions of people on Instagram and also your TED Talks. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, how you got into poetry? What's your story?
mhm. So it all really began, I guess, the work began projecting itself into the world in 2016. But the story goes, way back to the past where, as a child of um, a big family. I have five older siblings, and I'm much younger than all of them. They were kind of born right after each other, and then 8 years later, I was born. So there was always that divide between me and them, and me and my parents. And from a very young age, I felt like I was forced to be more mature than, what a kid my age would be expected to be. And I always felt out of place. Like I felt like I didn't belong to the world around me, which was children my age, and I still didn't belong in the world of adults. And so, I could sense from a very young age that I was a very sensitive person. Like I absorbed people's emotions, I absorbed their energies. But as a child, you don't know how to label things. You don't know how to um, make sense of things. You kind of internalize that something's wrong with you because you're not feeling okay a lot of the times. So always felt out of place, always felt like judged for being that sensitive person. Because when I would express emotions, it was always met with, why would you even feel that? Why would you even think that? And I was very, very heavily bullied in school, not physically, but for this issue is that I'm too emotional, I'm too sensitive, I care too much. Like I was the kid in the class who, if someone was making fun of someone and everybody else is laughing, I would be the one that says, no, that's wrong. I was the kid that if our teacher played a video that showed any hint of violence or pain, I would be crying. So, very quickly I learned that it was better for me to not express my emotions because it always led me down that path. So, internalized everything, barely had any friends. And then on my 13th birthday, my one and only friend at the time gifted me a journal. And that's when I started writing. And it was all writings that were just like me writing to myself. So my journal really became my only place of understanding. And at the time, my parents so we were living in Lebanon at the time. All of my siblings were here. I know it's a long story, but it helps you make sense of why these writings came to life. Um, so at the time we're living in Lebanon, all of my siblings had made their way back to Canada, either for school or work, and my parents started coming to visit them. So I lived with several relatives at the time, whoever could take care of me. And my journal was the only consistent sense of home with me because it was always with me in my backpack. It didn't matter where I was sleeping, which family I was living with. There was my safe place. It was with me. So at 16, I came to Canada to visit my family, and the war broke out while I was here in Lebanon.
Mhm.
So I kind of had, it was a sensitive year. It was right before grade 12. So I had to make the decision of, do I stay here or do I go to Lebanon? So I stayed here. And since that day, I would say from that day to the age of about 23, I felt like my life was in black and white because I didn't want to feel anymore. Like I felt so out of place. I was already out of place in Lebanon, but now I'm in, this new place where I have to be here. I don't want to be here because everything is new, and I'm gonna have to readapt to a new life. So I ripped up my journal at 16. I said I don't want to feel anymore. I don't, because every time I write, I'm reminded of the pain, and then I'm reminded that there's nothing I can do about it. So let me sorry. So I um, stopped writing altogether. And then at the age of 23, after becoming a teacher, my very first group of students were a group of young Libyan refugees who had just come from Libya because I was torn by war that summer. And I'll never forget that day. I will never forget the moment that I met them, because the principal walks in with them and he's like, these kids are your responsibility. And I just remember that look on their face of, where am I and why am I here? And I don't want to be here. But they were my responsibility for the rest of the year. Not only was I teaching them English, that was a small portion of what I was teaching them. What I felt my duty with them was to tell them, you do belong here. You're not out of place. You don't have to exert yourself to prove yourself or to prove your worth. You don't have to, just because you don't speak the language, it doesn't mean that you have to overcompensate for it in different areas. Like, you are valuable, you are worthy. And so when I started sharing snippets of writing with them to remind them of that, I realized that I was also healing my 16-year-old self. And so those writings became my first collection that I published in 2016, because the kids would share them with their friends, and the teachers in my school would see those writings on my personal Facebook page, and everybody was like, you need to put all of these in one place. So I put them into Mind Platter and self-published in 2016. And I just started sharing like little snippets on Instagram, and immediately I started finding people sharing my writings everywhere. And I think a few celebrities kind of gave it that push
Mm-hmm.
out into the world, and it's been a snowball effect since then. So that's the story.
That is profound. And thank you for walking us through that, because it's so important to have your background to see where the transformation was and how you were drawn to poetry and how that shaped your students and then really millions of people now. And if you guys look at her work, it really is magnetic. You can see one video and hear the voice and see the emotion that's put into the work, and you're drawn to it. And what I saw was so much feedback coming from people that were heartbroken. So whether they were bullied or whether they were broken up with, or they're experiencing grief, they really all resonate with the poetry and with the way, with the energy really you're putting into the world.
Yes.
Because it does feel like, even if it's your work, it does feel like when you're delivering it, when you're disseminating it, that it's for other people to really heal. And that comes across so apparently, and that doesn't always happen through social media. What kind of feedback have you seen with people that have been heartbroken? Why do you think it's so cathartic to hear your prose, your poetry, all of your work?
I think the reason it's cathartic is that there's no shame in it. Like, you see quite a few posts and videos that, portray strength as showing that you don't feel, or that you're not affected by someone mistreating you, or that you're not affected by the pain that they caused you, or you're not affected by the fact that they don't love you, or that they don't love you, they stopped loving you the way they loved you
Mhm,
before.
mhm,
And to me, when I express that pain, it's not to make anyone feel bad for me. It's not to dwell in my pain. It's just to say, this is how I feel. And strength isn't hiding it. Strength isn't pretending that I'm this, cold-hearted person. Strength is saying, this is how I feel right now. And I know that it might come across as weak, but that's what makes us human. Like, the same things that help you, the same traits that help you fall in love the way that you do, are the same traits that come into effect when you're heartbroken. Like, you can't just turn it on when you're falling in love and turn it off when someone falls out of love with you, or when you fall out of love with someone. So I think the reason it's cathartic is it's real, it's raw, it's unapologetic, and uh, people struggle with that. They struggle with putting words to their emotions. A lot of times they don't even know what they're feeling. They feel this like uncomfortable feeling on the inside. And, so it's much easier to ignore it or avoid it and say, I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to get into another relationship. I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to, you know, find this other addiction that's going to distract me from this, but you're not getting rid of it. It's still there. And so I think what my writings offer is a sense of let the pain in. Like, you're going to have to feel it for it to leave. There's a poem that I wrote that says, when pain knocks on your door, let it in, sit with it, have a conversation with it, have tea with it. I always say
I
this is
love that.
have tea with your pain.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you control allowing it in, you control when it leaves. It's like a visitor. Like, so I just recently announced that I wrote my 4th book, Welcome Home, which is a self-development book.
Right.
And so you're imagining that you're building a home within for yourself. So if there's pain, when pain knocks on that door, it's going to keep knocking. And the more you ignore it, you think it's going away. But what's really happening is over time, you're getting used to your life in that noise, but you don't hear that noise as much because you're adapting to it. You're getting used to it. It's like the way that your eyes adapt to the darkness. You start seeing a little bit after a short period of time, and then you're not noticing the darkness so much because you're like, I can live in this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same thing with adapting to light as well. You have to remind yourself of that, is that just because you're able to live with that pain knocking and being so intense, it doesn't mean that that's how you should be living. You need to allow that pain in, sit with it, understand what it's trying to tell you, and then you can say, I see why that hurt me. I see why this pain is present, but I also see that it doesn't define me and that it's external to me and that it's just a visitor, just like another human being into my life. It's just a visitor. So you take away its power when you let it in. And that's what my poems do for people, is that they're just saying, this is what you're feeling and it's fine. It's beautiful. But there's another emotion waiting at your door, whether it's happiness or whatever it is that you have the power to allow in.
Yeah, I think it's a shared experience. So when you're reading your poetry and they're receiving it, it's a shared experience. So they already don't feel as alone, but there's also something so creative about it that you can create this beauty out of it. And they're not noticing that maybe when it's late at night and they're crying. One, they're not having a shared experience, and two, they're not seeing what kind of art can be created around it. And the most important thing, like you said, is that we don't actually have that catharsis and we don't feel, then the pain will not mitigate as fast and it can actually be prolonged throughout your entire
Yes.
life.
Yes.
So it's so important to actually feel that emotion. And that can
Yes.
be really difficult for men and for women.
Mm-hmm.
But that makes it like there's an outlet and it's like you can hold their hand through it, but
Yeah.
it feels fun. It feels fun while you are reciting it. So it's really a stimulating and creative way to actually feel your emotions, which can be such the barrier to actually get through it, because you're right, they try to play games, maybe manipulate to get back. There's all kinds of things that the people do to distract. They engage in maladaptive behaviors like drinking
Yes.
or dating too many people too soon. And that's really just burying it. And they know it's a band-aid maybe, but they don't know how to get into that channel to actually start healing. So that's what I love about your work.
Aw.
It was really good to watch it. So what do you think the biggest mistake is when people are evaluating themselves after a heartbreak?
Mm-hmm. Focusing too much on the person as, you know, that was supposed to be the person that is the love of my life. And you start, instead of looking at the experience as a whole, what it served you, what it taught you, what it made you realize about yourself, you're just focusing on that person, what you felt with them, and you're grieving the person instead of grieving the person and the relationship. And it's like when you only are trying to let go of the person, when they come back, you just mentioned this, if they come back, it's like that's the solution. That's what I'm looking for because that's what I lost. But when we fail to look at the relationship as a whole, when we fail to look at it from a logical point of view, you know, um, you're not meant to end up with every person that you meet. Like I wrote this in Sparks of Phoenix. Sometimes people will walk into your life to teach you something. Not every person who walks into your life is meant to stay, but we hold on to everyone who walks in as if they're going to stay forever because we're so afraid of being alone. But if you think about it in a way that's like, if you were to carry behind you, like chain yourself to every person who walks into your life and say, just because they walked into my life, that means that they're going to be there forever. You are carrying such a heavy weight. Like you really have to see people as you're crossing paths with them. You're either going to continue walking on, two parallel paths together, or you cross paths and they continue on their path and you continue on yours. And you've learned something in that intersection, in that crossover that you had. But we make the mistake of dwelling too much on that one person and why did they leave and what does that mean about me? Like, how could this person, I hear this a lot, how could someone who I gave a chance to, someone who I'm so much better than, how could they choose to walk away from me? Becomes this like ego conversation where it's like, how could that person, again, the focus is on them. It's not on, again, it's not on the relationship as a whole. It's not on, was this the right relationship for me? It's not on, did this relationship actually nourish me and help me grow? Did this relationship, if I were to continue in this relationship, would I be happy? And a lot of the times the answer is no, but we always think, I'd rather be safe, like feel safe in, knowing that this person is still in my life than, feel the pain of this relationship ending and taking time to reevaluate what I want, then getting into another relationship, taking that risk again. And so there's always, what if I'm making a mistake? But what if I'm doing the right thing? Like you also have to think of the opposite. What if this is the right thing? So I think the biggest mistake is dwelling too much on the person instead of the relationship as a whole. You have to grieve the relationship as a whole. You have to grieve your past self that, for example, may have allowed you to accept certain treatments that now that the relationship is over, you can tell, I will never accept this again. Because again, another common theme is, maybe if I were to go back and maybe if in that instant or in that moment I had said something differently or done something differently, things would have been different. If it's broken, none of that was going to fix it. If it was broken, strong relationships are not fragile. It's not a moment that breaks a relationship. It's not a word that you say. It's not an action that you make. I always say, if the person that you're with is really the right person for you to be with, even if you were to have a moment of just you've fallen into what your ego is telling you and you said some mean or harsh things to that person, they will give you the benefit of the doubt because they know you as a whole. They know this is not really you. They will on their own understand this is coming from an insecurity. This is coming because she's having a bad day, or they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt because they know you as a whole.
Right.
But, if a relationship that was solid, say for a whole year, and then you have one moment of weakness where you said something that you didn't really mean, or it's stemming from hurt, and that alone is going to make the person that you're with forget that whole year of that solid relationship that you've built, then they were looking for a reason for it to end anyway. Do you
Right.
know what I mean? So nothing is like, when you go back and think, maybe that was the reason, maybe that was the reason. The thing is, if you were to be able to go back to that moment and change it, another moment is waiting, would have been waiting to cause that end anyway, because
Yeah.
it just wasn't going to work. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So, absolutely. I think from an evolutionary standpoint, we know that when they're rejected, they're just looking around to see what was the cause. They need the causation. So, they're obsessively searching for the answer for that. And then I agree. I think a lot of times when they actually visualize themselves back in that relationship, they can see what the pitfalls are and the fact that they may just want to leave anyway. So, it does become that competition. So,
Yes.
so really rebuilding the identity is typically the right thing to do. But I think when you're coming from a loving place, you actually want the other person to feel happy too. And you actually start maturing at certain points in your life and figuring out that, you know what, the things that you do or the dreams that you're going for, it may not be a fit for this other person, for their lifestyle, for where they want to live. There's all kinds of variables. But
Yes.
that's so hard to do when people are ego wounded. But to get away from the ego, I think, can be really, really healing. So I love that you brought that up. What do you think it takes to rebuild an identity? What are some of what's the formula in your opinion? What do you see helps as far as rebuilding an identity? Because you can really take a hit as far as your self-esteem and how you see yourself. What do you think helps develop that or redevelop your identity after heartbreak?
So I said this in my very first TEDx on finding home through poetry. And I said the biggest mistake that we make is that we build our homes in other people. We build that safe place for us. We invest all that love and kindness and respect, that because at the end of the day, we feel like that's the home that we're going to, so that we're going to invest in it anyway. And then when those people walk away, those homes walk away with them. And all of a sudden we feel empty. And so I always say that emptiness is valid, because you did spend quite a bit of time investing in another person inside of someone else. But here's what you need to remember: your ability to give them what you gave them means you are the source of whatever it is that you gave them. So the rebuilding of your identity begins with you asking yourself, where am I now? Validate for yourself that feeling of emptiness and void that you have. There's no shame in that. We all go through something like this.
Mhm.
Know where to start. Because if you're here, but really in your mind, you want to be in that place where you are full of self-love, full of, your ability to let go, full of self-compassion, but you're not really there, then you're forcing yourself to start at a place that is way ahead where you actually are, and you're going to miss building all of this. So you have to be honest with yourself. Where am I? What am I feeling like? Where do I want to be? And what do I need to do to get there? I actually use this in education as well, because I'm a teacher. Always ask my students, when it comes to this concept, what do you know? What level of knowledge do you want to get to? And what do we need to do to get there? So where am I now? I'm feeling homeless. I'm feeling like I don't have my own sense of, um, you know, um, sense of identity. I don't know who I am. I don't know what value the love that I have within is. I don't know what kind of love I deserve. And so when you ask yourself those questions and realize where you actually are, then you say, okay, well, I need to nourish my sense of self-love. I need to redefine what self-love means, because maybe at some point I thought self-love means, a spa day or taking a bath or shopping, but really self-love is giving yourself what you need.
Yeah.
It could be a spa day, but it could also be therapy.
Right.
It could be a spa day, but it could also be, you know, drawing boundaries with the people around you, building boundaries and saying, I'm not going to allow this to happen anymore. Self-love could be teaching yourself how to not feel guilty for drawing a boundary. So you start with understanding what self-love means to you. You start with understanding what needs do you have? What wants do you have? You start with understanding, like, what kind of time and energy do I want to allow others, or allow myself to give to others? What kind of, I talk about this in Welcome Home, where you feel like there's a power bubble around you, where, you know, this is your safe place. As you're walking around, people could be throwing arrows at you, and you know, you can see them. It's just like when someone leaves a negative comment, you can see it, but you could say, but this doesn't come past this point, it's not going to affect me, and I get to redirect it the way that I want. So know where you are now and be brutally honest with yourself, and know what you need to do, and learn about all of these concepts of self-love, of forgiveness, of letting go, of surrendering to your emotions, of opening the door to, you know, um, all of the past stories and all of the past traumas that you've kind of tucked away because you're like, that isn't me anymore, you know. But if it's not you anymore, then you can be at peace with it. But clearly you're not at peace with it because you're saying, I don't want to deal with this.
Right.
Open the door, learn about being compassionate with yourself, and get to a point where that home is within you. And you realize that betraying yourself just so that someone else could welcome you into their home, into their life, that's not the answer. You need to be there for yourself before you expect someone to be there for you. You need to, and I know people say things like, you know, the whole argument that don't expect someone to love you before you love yourself is wrong because everybody deserves love. I agree with that. You know, you not loving yourself doesn't give someone a green light to take advantage of you. But for your own well-being and for your own sake, do not compensate for the love that you need to be giving yourself by chasing someone else's love to feel like you are worthy of love, you know? And
Completely.
once you get to that point, who you are will shine through to you, because you're not so much focused on someone else looking at you and being like, you deserve love. You are, that love is actually shining from within, and whoever doesn't belong in your life will immediately turn away because your energy won't even allow them in. You'll clash, you know? I hope that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And you're right. It is the energy that emanates, and it's also the behaviors. So maybe even if you're an adolescent, like maybe your people pleasing behaviors actually attracted some people who were malintended. They can
Yes.
be in your environment regardless of how you are, but that can be an attractor, a magnet for people to want to do that. And it's the same thing when you're dating or when you're in a relationship. The more
Yeah.
you undervalue yourself, the more they see weakness. And unfortunately, people do prey on that. Even good people, well-intended people can prey on that, even not even thinking about it. So that could just mean being taken for granted. Maybe you're pulling more weight in the relationship than you should be. And you have to get to that place where you know your boundaries and you know what to expect in someone else. And in which case, the added product of that is that your next relationship, the person is forced to respect you more, and you're going to be equals. You're going to come into it as equals. You're not going to allow people to make you feel less than, because like you said, you're already in that bubble and it can't penetrate.
Yeah.
And you can feel it, you can experience it, but that person won't last long because they'll know that you respect yourself so much and that you love yourself and you love everything you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely feel that shift. And that's the beauty, I think, in going through a breakup, is that you do get to this higher level of self-development and you do become more self-protective, but not in a way where your guard is up, in a way where you're really just seeing the beauty of yourself and your strength, and other people around you are seeing that. And that strength, that legitimate strength, is going to repel a lot of people that are malintended. But that was really beautifully put. Can you tell us a little bit about your new book, Welcome Home? What is it about, and what do you think they're going to take home from it?
So Welcome Home is it's a self-development book. It does contain poetry. People have been asking that question, but it is more of a storytelling memoir, um, practical strategies infused with poetry throughout to help you, first of all, validate your emotions, validate your current state, but also know what to do moving forward. Know actually how to, because you could read a poem that empowers you to feel like, I need to focus on my self-love, I need to focus on my worth, but how do you do it? So I give you practical strategies in the book. And it's all based on that first TEDx talk where I talk about the biggest mistake being that we build our homes in other people. So where do you begin with building a home within yourself? So I walk you through it from the foundation of self-acceptance and self-awareness all the way up to different rooms of self-love, forgiveness, compassion, clarity, surrender. And then there's the dream garden where it's all about your purpose. It's all about being true to what you believe is the right thing for you to be doing with your life. And it's supposed to be a guide that walks with you no matter what stage of healing you're at. If you are at a point where you feel like this is where most of us are at. We know what self-love looks like. We know what forgiveness looks like. We know what letting go looks like. We know all of these things, but when it comes to our own lives, we fail to put that into practice. Why? Because I'm different. I'm an empath. I understand them. They're I'll give you the right advice as a friend, but when it comes to my own situation, there's this, it's like a cognitive dissonance where you know what you're going through, you can see it, but you don't want to believe it because you think you're supposed to save everyone, you think you're supposed to help everybody. And I always say this to people, and I say this to myself too. Yes, it could be that the person that you're with requires help, but you should not be the one who helps the person that you're with be ready to be with you. They need to go seek that help on their own. You need to be helping yourself. So Welcome Home is about building that sense of autonomy with your own authenticity, instead of building homes in a job or in a person or in a friend or in a family member. Like, by building a home, I mean that you are defining your worthiness of anything through their eyes, under their roof, not yours. And so Welcome Home brings you to a point where you look at yourself and you say, I am my own home. I will come to myself for that validation. I will see myself through my own eyes before I see myself through someone else's eyes. I will see that my voice is more amplified than someone else's voice in my life. So there are practical strategies for absolutely anything that you can think of. How do I love myself more? In that room, I've called those strategies gems, because when I think of the self-love room, I see gems all around. I see beautiful things all around. When it comes to forgiveness, I call them outlets. These are strategies. This is how you can let go. This is how you can release certain people. There's an activity that actually went viral on TikTok when I shared it of, imagine walking up to the person who hurt you and telling them, thank you for everything you taught me, and imagining them walk away. There's another activity with chains where that person who hurt you, you feel chained to them somehow. You feel chained to the past. And I walk you through it step by step on how do you cut each one of those chains and how do you feel that release. In the clarity room, I talk about getting clarity on who your authentic self is. Who are you really as a person? What do you really believe? Where do you want your life to be? If your life were a blank canvas right now, what would it look like? What would you draw on it? And so the strategies in that room are called mirrors, because it's the clarity room. And when you look in the mirror, you see the truth for what it really is. So I guide you through that. The surrender room is about opening the door for emotions that you're feeling. It's that activity that I told you about, allowing pain in and having tea with it, is in the surrender room. But one of the biggest revelations I had as I was writing Welcome Home in the surrender room was I found myself talking about opening the door to negative emotions. And I was like, well, what about the positive ones? Why don't we talk about our fear of actually experiencing positive emotions? Because we're like, I feel selfish for experiencing this. Or so I did a balance of both. Open the door, allow yourself to be happy, allow yourself to experience joy and euphoria, and allow yourself to experience all of that. And compassion. In the compassion room, there's compassion towards yourself and there's compassion towards the world. And I talk about how your learnings and teachings about compassion towards yourself will set the bar to how compassionate people are towards you. And with the analogy of home, I say, imagine that you had a dinner and you had a guest list, and someone that you invited into your home actually insulted you. Because in that chapter, I talk about boundaries. What would you do in that case? Like, would you invite that person again? Probably not. Would you allow that person to stay in your home after insulting you? You would probably escort them to the door, kindly ask them to leave, or wait for them to leave and just say, I'm only going to see this person once in a blue moon, or never see them again. And then I say, are you on your guest list? Do you treat yourself to the same things that you have to offer other people? And that's a question that most people cry when I ask them, because they see giving as one directional. You give it to others. Giving it to yourself is, you're not trained to do that. You need to train yourself to do that. And in the Dream Garden, I talk about, I tell my story of coming to writing, because, I come from a teaching background, and how that, it kind of, the dream itself, I was taking the opportunities and the doors that were opening in my face as, I'm capable of doing this. And I want to do this. So I wasn't blinding myself to the opportunities that were opening up. And so by following my intuition, by following what I knew I was good at and I needed to be doing, I got to the place where I am today. Instead of saying, I have a dream of becoming this, and if I don't become this, then something must be wrong with me. So I walk you through, I call them lanterns of, insight into how you should be following your dream or living your dream. And we get to a point where, you've built your own home. What comes next? And like, it's honestly, this book is going to change the world. I just know it. It's going to change so many people's lives.
It sounds incredibly impactful. Your work really is inspiring, and you make people feel safe and accepted while also teaching them, which is an incredible combination. And I could talk to you for hours, and everyone that's listening, I can tell you right now that this has been a huge gift for them. So tell us where they can find you, where they can consume more of your content.
Yeah, so my handle on all platforms is at Najwa Zebian, NAJWAZEBIAN. My website is najwazebian.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. And I have a newsletter called Divine Talk, where I share reflections bi-weekly at this point, and some snippets of writing. I also have quite a few free guides on either my website or on YouTube that people can watch, and hopefully it can help them.
Well, I am so glad to know you, and I'm so glad to know that you put this out into the world, genuinely. Thank you for coming on, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.